Hi, Nicola. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I
Pleasure.
appreciate it. So it says on your bio that you grew up in Los Angeles. That's kind of unusual. I don't know of a lot of people who grew up in Los Angeles. Usually people are born somewhere else and they move there, for work, or usually actors or although it could
Yeah.
be just the people that I interview tend to be in the entertainment industry. But
hmm
were you born there as well?
I was actually born in the capital of Sacramento, but then came to LA when I was, I think, about 2 or 3 months old. And then I'm a product, as they say, of LA Unified. I went through LA Unified, and then I went through the LA Community College, and then I graduated from CSUN, Cal State Northridge. So I am a product of LA, and I've been there most of my adult life. And I'm still in LA County today. So.
What's LA Unified?
Oh, Los Angeles Unified School District. It's the second largest school district in the country, behind New York.
Oh, okay. All right.
So yeah, if people are from LA and they say LAUSD, yeah, that's the school district.
And you went to college. You got a degree in communications. What uh, what sort of work have you done, or are you doing?
I've had a very varied career. I did work as a reporter for two newspapers. I worked in government. I've worked in county. I worked for a senator. I worked for a congresswoman. And then I've also worked for several nonprofits, including currently I'm working for a nonprofit. So I've had a varied career and doing different things.
Okay. Have you been writing all the way through? I mean, is that something that you were passionate about from a long time ago?
Yeah, I have been writing. I was a huge reader even when I was young. I remember going to by myself, going to the local library and really loving to read. And then when I was in fifth grade, one of my teachers said, "Oh, you should really keep your stories," because she knew I was writing, and so I did. And then I wrote a what I call the ungreat American novel. I wrote that while I was a teenager in high school about a ballerina dancer, and I would go with my mom to work. She was a legal secretary, and I would be typing away, and so I was writing, but not really seriously. And then at the end of 2013 was when I had been posting on a blog, and one of my dear friends said, "Hey, why don't you turn that into a novel and publish it on Amazon?" The indie world was really exploding at that time, and so I did. So I took off 2 weeks from the nonprofit I was working at and finished it because it had been, like I said, chapters on a blog, and created a beginning, created an ending, and that became my first novel.
How many novels have you written at this point?
The Imperial Orchid, which is my most recent, that's 16. So number 16.
Oh, wow, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And over how many
And I'm
years?
I'm currently writing number 17 right now
Over how many years is that?
from 2014. So little less than
So
seven
that's
years.
wow. Okay, so
Math
that's
not my strong point.
well, that's over two books a year then, yeah.
Yeah, and I did take off one year where I think I wrote three in that year. So it does tend to be about two a year. Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you a technical question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How long does it take you from start to finish on a typical novel, and about how many words are your novels?
Sure. So I have kind of it set down. So what happens is it usually takes about a month and a half, and I actually have an Excel spreadsheet that I monitor. So I try to do 1,500 words a day, and so that's how I've got it down to a month and a half, and that's just the writing. And once the writing is complete, then there's a whole other process, which is the editing, which I go back and forth, and then of course there's the cover, and so that has to go back and forth to make sure it's looking good. And then the formatting, it has to be appropriate for Amazon. And then there's also the used to be CreateSpace, but Amazon has taken it over. CreateSpace is the physical book. So if you buy a physical book, that has to be a completely different format. So there's a whole process, but the actual writing takes about a month and a half of just getting the book out. And historic romance, mysteries, what I write is usually anywhere to 70 to 80,000 words. Can go over, can be a little bit in between there, but my novels are usually about 80, a little bit more, maybe sometimes 83, 84,000 words. And that's roughly about 300 plus pages.
Well, the reason I ask is because I do get an awful lot of authors on this show, and the response I get varies radically.
Sure.
The fastest one was 2 weeks to do
Oh,
90,000
wow.
words.
Oh, so they didn't sleep.
I guess not. I mean, I was blown away by that answer. I thought
That's a lot.
that's incredible. And
Yeah.
then, up to like 1 year to do one book for some people. So now your editing process, do you have someone else do it? I mean, once you've got your basic idea, your draft, and do you give it to someone else to edit?
Oh no, I take my writing very seriously, and I try because people are spending their money on my books. I want it to be the best possible product I can can get out there. So I absolutely and have always employed a professional editor. I recently signed with a publishing company, a boutique publishing company, so they're handling the editing process, but they still also have an editor that takes it once it's complete, does a complete read through, gives me back their changes, and then we go back and forth. Do I approve the changes? Do I need to do rewrites? Is there continuity issues? That sort. So that'll be maybe, depending on the rewrite that they're asking for, maybe a two. I think I've never had more than 3 week process of that going back and forth.
A boutique publisher is what? Like a
Mhm.
small indie publisher?
Yes, they're based. It's Cresting Wave. They're based in Washington State.
Okay, how do they differ from Random House?
Well, yeah. So Random House, yeah, that's a huge. They probably have the Jane Pattersons, the Stephen Kings. Boutiques are a little bit smaller, smaller kind of group of writers that they're looking, that they represent, and just kind of just a smaller, I would say, just on a smaller scale.
Is it easier for a first time author to get picked up by them? Do they still have to go through the approval process, or they'll take anything that you send them essentially?
I'm not sure because I am on I'm a passionate film noir and old classic film, and so I am an admin on Facebook for a theater here in the LA area, and so the one of the people that sits on that is a she does radio. She's a radio personality here in LA, and then the other person that sits on the advisory is a filmmaker, and so they put me in touch with this publishing company. So I didn't actually go to them like off the street and say, "Hey, I'd like to be represented." I was referred by my two colleagues or my two
Oh, I
friends,
see.
and so
Okay.
that's how I got to be with the publishing company.
It's always better to get in that way than trying to
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah,
it cold.
absolutely.
Well, let's see. You mentioned your book, The Imperial Orchid, which is the latest book. Is that the one? Do you have one to hold up?
No, I have two of my, as I
Oh,
said, I
your
have two
older
of my
books.
older ones because I have a bookstore, an indie bookstore here where I live that is gracious enough to sell my books, and so I always ship directly to her. I don't tend to keep on and hold on to any books, but this is number three, The Chic Son, and then this is number one. This is the one that started it all, The Sheik and the Slave, and this is the mother of the Sheik's son. So mother son.
Oh,
So
okay. All right. Is
yeah.
this a
So this,
series?
it wasn't you there. I don't tend to do series. They're all standalone, but in several of my books, you will see characters that are in one that will pop up in another. So again, I don't do series, but yeah, there are several characters that have been in one book that I think, oh, they're a great character. I really like them. I'm gonna do another book, and they're gonna be the lead. So that's what happens in a lot of my books.
Now, you said you've written, what, 16, 17 books already. Are they all the same genres?
That's something that people have asked me, and I don't plan to do it this way, but they're very different. The Sheik and the Slave is like early 1700s. Um, I have one book that's like 1880s, the Tea Plantation. I have another book that's right at the end of the French Revolution. I have one book that's 1920s Egypt. I mean, they're all over the place. So I'm not like a Regency author or a Georgian author. No, it's really what I like to do as a historical is really focus on the time. And then I start to create the story, and then the characters follow, and then it becomes the story. So yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Are they all romantic?
No, that's funny. There a lot of the beginning ones were, but then as I really started becoming writing more and more books, I really took a little bit of a detour into historical mystery. So I have four that are historic mysteries. So there's the romance, and then there's the mystery that's more a little darker, a little bit of some kind of like I would say a little bit Agatha Christie, but darker. And they always tend to be Victorian era, end of the Victorian era. So 1880s, 1890s, that time frame.
That happens to be probably my favorite period of time
Yeah,
in
I do.
history.
I
Is
like
is
it.
that yours as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I like that time a
So,
lot.
something very fascinating about that time.
Yeah,
The whole world was changing. I mean, similarly now,
yeah,
we could argue, but different.
yes,
we,
yes.
I suppose the difference is we know what happened after the 1880s and 1900s. We don't know what's going to happen after all of this
We
that's
don't.
going on. So
We don't.
makes it a bit more scary to be living
Yeah,
through it.
yes,
Definitely.
very
Okay,
much so.
so we've got just a couple minutes left. Your latest
Okay.
book is The Imperial Orchid. And can
Yes.
you give us a 1 or 2 minute synopsis?
Sure, absolutely. So, what I started focusing on with this book, and this is again more of the mystery, the historic mystery, is I really like to create, and I've noticed this because romance readers tend to be 85% women. So I always take that into consideration, and I really love to create a strong male, but also a strong, assertive female. And especially in these times, there are certain times I write about that they have a degree, and in the Victorian era, that was extremely rare. And so for this book, The Imperial Orchid, I created a character who's actually the sister, the younger sister of the main character from the book before, Among the Darkness Stirs. And in this book, she's an illustrator, and she is used by the Royal Horticultural Society. She's gone to Switzerland, she's gone to parts of Europe, and she illustrates because that was, they didn't, they had cameras, but it was, they would illustrate, flora and fauna. And she gets on a list of a very illustrious illustrator. She's very well desired as an illustrator, and there is a Lord Holloway, who wants to finance a an expedition trip to Ceylon, which is current day Sri Lanka. And this is actually the second time I've written about Ceylon. And he is what you would call there was something going on right in this time period called orchid mania, orchid delirium, and it rivaled the tulips of the Dutch times in the 1600s. And people were paying exorbitant amounts for these orchids, and they would get these orchids, and there's a bunch of, like, they call them orchid hunters, and there's been books written about it, and it's just absolutely fascinating. That's actually why I started writing this book, because I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. So this Lord Holloway has a son, and his son's he's a good guy, but he's kind of lost his way. He's been in a couple of wars, and so he's to take this expedition team to Ceylon to find this rare orchid that it's called the Imperial Orchid, but it's kind of half myth, half legend. And if they can find it, they want to bring it back. And on the way to Ceylon, they run into some problems because somebody is actually there watching them, who also wants the orchid, and kind of nefarious means. And so that's kind of the story. So obviously, the son Miles and Francis, the illustrator, they have their little romance going on, but it's also about finding this orchid to bring it back. And as I said, somebody's watching them that also wants the orchid for themselves, and that's the story of them. That's the story, to bring back this orchid and see if they can find it.
Okay, well, it sounds like a great sort of epic Disney kind of movie. Yeah, I can already see it playing in my head. There was a movie called Anaconda that came
Yeah.
out, and there
Jennifer
was
Lopez.
I forget which. There was like 1, 2, and 3 or something, but it
Okay.
was the one with John Voight was in it.
Uh-huh. Jennifer Lopez is in it too.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right, and there was a orchid or something
Okay.
in that had some sort
Got
of magic powers or something like that.
it. Magic powers.
I forget exactly what it was, but
That's exactly how my books start. I get like a seed of, oh, this will be a great story, and that was it, the orchid mania, and then it becomes the story. So it starts with this little kind of like, oh, they could be searching for it, and there'd be romance, and there'd be, of course, we got to have a couple deaths, murders, and yeah, and so that's how I write. So there's no, like you said when you asked the time frame, yeah, there's no rhyme or reason, just whatever I think might tell a good story.
Well, I think that's the true spirit of creativity because you just sort of start with one point on the map, if you will, and you just start bringing things in that make sense to do, rather than having it all listed out. Okay, I'm going to do this, then this, and that gets to be too a little bit mathematical, I think.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. But everybody's different.
Everyone's
Like when you
different.
asked
Yeah.
how I do, some people have, massive outlines, some people just like free write. So I guess it's whatever works for you, right? So,
Well, it's funny because most people, when they write a treatment for a screenplay, it's usually 1, 2, or 3 pages long,
mhm.
typically. And James Cameron writes 70-page treatments.
Oh, wow.
So, but he's James
That's,
Cameron, so he can do whatever he
yeah,
wants. I think
yeah,
that's the
that's
lesson
true.
to be learned from that statement. Uh, Nicola, we do have to wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. It's my name. So it's Nicola, Nicola, and then Italia, Italia.com. And I'm on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So if you want to, professionally stalk me, go for it.
Great. Thanks so much for coming